So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Will Trevor, and I'm Assistant Dean and Director of the online programs here at Albany Law School. We're delighted to welcome you here today. Albany Law School runs online graduate programs in cybersecurity and privacy law, in financial compliance and risk management, in health law and compliance, and also from January, we will be starting a human resources Masters LLM and certificate program. Now, we run a regular series of lunchtime webinars. Our speaker today, who I'll introduce in a moment, is Jimmy Nguyen, who is founding president of the Bitcoin Association, and he is going to be talking about Bitcoin, blockchain technology and the future of the law. He's a JD, so he knows a bit. He knows a bit about that, which is good. I'm going to just play you a brief video that's going to tell you a little bit more about Albany Law School and also the programs that we offer. I'm then going to introduce Jimmy and tell you a bit more about him before he starts. But first, a video about some of the programs that we offer here at Albany.
Many lawyers are looking to handle financial policy and compliance issues. So Albany Law School created the LLM in financial compliance and risk management for you, so you can expand your expertise to reach new clients and grow your practice.
Law.com reports that data privacy and cybersecurity officers are in high demand with little competition, and IAPP reports that 42% of all cybersecurity and privacy professionals hold a professional degree. Click below to learn more, and we look forward to speaking with you about how Albany Law School will help you advance your career to the next level.
Now, we do offer an LLM in financial compliance and risk management. We also offer a master's in financial compliance and risk management, and also a 9-credit certificate, which at $6,995 is a very cost-effective way of credentialing your knowledge in the financial compliance space. If you're interested and want to know more, I'm going to put my email in the chat box and you can contact me. I've also posted a link to a survey, and I will post it again at the end and send it out. But if you'd like to learn more about the programs that we offer, I'd be delighted to talk to you about them. But without further ado, I'm now going to introduce you to Jimmy Nguyen, who is the founding president of the Bitcoin Association. He is one of the leading advocates of Bitcoin. He's, as I mentioned, founding president of the Bitcoin Association. It's based in Switzerland, a global industry organization that works to advance business on Bitcoin and blockchain. Now, it's the only project dedicated to the original design, protocols, and Satoshi vision of Bitcoin's pseudonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. It's massively scaling to be the world's one blockchain for global enterprise applications and the world's digital currency. Now, previously, Jimmy was CEO of N-Chain Group, the leader in advisory research and development of blockchain technologies. And he's also served on the advisory board for TAAL, Distribution Information Technologies, a Canadian public subsidiary. And in January 2020, Jimmy was recognized as one of the most influential individuals in blockchain by Tegernsec, an information security research company. He's a strong advocate of diversity and equality rights. He co-chaired the California Minority Council program and was inducted into its Diversity Leader Hall of Fame in 2015. And Diversity MBA magazine named him the top 100 under 50 diverse executive leaders. Not a list I would be able to get on anymore. But Jimmy, welcome to you. I've made you a co-host, so if you want to share your screen, we're all ready for you. Welcome. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And let me share my screen now. So I'm glad to be talking to all of you lawyers, because I still spend a lot of my time with lawyers. As Will has mentioned, I am a recovering lawyer. I spent about 21 years in private practice as an intellectual property and digital technology lawyer. And the course of my career office before I departed to more I'm here today because I'm sure you have it, any of it. Most lawyers talk to say, you know, understanding it better, and also explaining some of its use cases and how it's going to affect the future of law. I come at this from one very simple principle. Do the clients you represent and you want to go the way of Blockbuster Video, or do you want to be Netflix? Being a company that has Netflix in the digital world by changing its business model and changing its approach to adapt to new technology and becoming now one of the leaders of digital streaming and changing all of Hollywood? Or do you want to go by the way of Blockbuster? And most of the companies I speak to are exploring the idea of blockchain technology, but trying to navigate, well, how actually can they really use it? Because they don't want to be left behind. They're not exactly sure how it's going to change their industry, but they know it's very important to understand early if they want to take lessons from the internet. And the internet is something I'll talk about a lot today, because I was a young lawyer graduating law school in the mid-1990s, right at the internet boom. And that's what led me to my career in the digital technology field, wanting to follow this internet boom. And I view blockchain technology as the next major technology advancement of our lifetime that will impact business just like the internet did. And that's why I want everyone on this phone call, including your companies and clients you work for, to be the Netflixes of the world and not the Blockbusters when it comes to blockchain technology. So today I'm going to do one breakdown. I hope you all can understand easily. Then talk about blockchain use cases, and then finally explore what are some of the implications for the legal industry and legal issues that are already popping up. So let's begin with what's a blockchain. I'm sure you've heard some descriptions about it, but like a lot of lawyers, you're probably going, I kind of get it, but I don't really get it. It's very abstract. And I can tell you that even in my own experience learning about Bitcoin and blockchain, it took really diving into the industry full time to really get my best understanding about it. In essence, blockchains are a way to solve a current business problem we have across many industries, which is that most industries operate with intermediaries, companies, people in the middle who facilitate the passing of data, or in the world of money, payments. And every time you have an intermediary in the middle, that intermediary takes usually a cut of money, increasing the cost of providing a service such as sending money. As well as requiring companies to trust each intermediary in terms of the data they keep to make sure it's accurate, timely, and that it's be able to be accessed whenever they want. So on the right here, you can see just a diagram of what the money system looks like when we're using credit cards, payment cards, right? If there's all these people involved, you as the card holder on the bottom left, you have a card issuer, a bank that issues your card. They have an agreement with a card scheme, one of the major payment networks such as Visa or MasterCard. To get to merchants, they usually go through a merchant acquirer. And then finally, you have the merchant that you will pay to, a Starbucks or a Tesco grocery store in the United Kingdom, for example. Each of those players takes a cut of money, and it also slows down the process to some extent and requires you to trust the other person in the process. So to create a different kind of money system where you didn't have to trust anyone in the middle, blockchain was created. And it is the solution technologically that was introduced by Bitcoin, creating the original blockchain brought to the world. Through this, the Satoshi Nakamoto famed Bitcoin white paper, which was released online in 2008, introducing the idea of a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. How do we create a digital cash that we can all use quickly, easily, instantly, that I could send electronic cash to Will anywhere in the world without needing all of those people in the middle? That's the question that Bitcoin and blockchain tried to answer. And their answer to it is creating a different form of record keeping. And if there's one thing you learn today, that's it. A blockchain is just a way to keep records. It is a digital ledger. But unlike in the old days where there was a central company that maintained the copy of the ledger, such as your bank, keeping track of the entries going in and out of your bank account, or for example, payment networks keeping track of payments across the Visa. You have, instead of one company keeping the ledger, the trust that the company is doing it, not cheating or gaining records in the ledger. You have a ledger that is distributed. It's across a network of computers all over the world. Instead of having one copy or one controller, there's many. Here's a diagram of what you can imagine the Bitcoin ledger. Bitcoin ledger is in the middle there with the XLS Excel file, because you can imagine it kind of like a big giant Excel file in the sky. It just keeps data, like you put entries into an Excel file. But instead of one copy of it, you could see this ring of computing nodes that all maintain a copy of it, and they all update that copy anytime new transactions are added into the ledger. And because you have many, many copies of it maintained by nodes across the world, it makes it much harder to cheat because everyone is looking and verifying at the same ledger. In addition, you can send transactions across the ledger without needing somebody in the middle to be able to only be the person that can process or verify that transaction. Many people are involved in the process. So it's a different way of thinking about record keeping to eliminate the need for having that sort of central authority in the middle. So what does it do? Well, you have the ledger can record all kinds of transactions. People think about Bitcoin as just a money system, but I'm here to also encourage you to think much bigger about what Bitcoin can be. It's a ledger record any type of data transaction, because when you send Bitcoin across the network, you're not really sending actual electronic cash, you're just sending pieces of data that represent some type of money value. So the digital ledger records transactions, which can be of payments or other types of transactions. It can actually record data to the blockchain, and it's passing control of Bitcoin from one owner to another. Those transactions are timestamped. This is really important to understand as well. And in fact, the Bitcoin white paper does not use the word blockchain at all. It uses the phrase distributed timestamp server. So you're timestamping transaction sets. So on the right here, you can see some graphics I've taken from what's called a block explorer. It's just a web-based way of a service that people have created so you can kind of see and visualize what's happening in the blockchain. On the bottom, you see what says 14,200 transactions. I didn't get them all, I only got the first 9. Each of those numerical entries is a transaction in the blockchain. They're collected together in a block, because you put transactions into the ledger in groups, in blocks of data. So as you can see at the top, it's a reference to a particular block number. There's a timestamp, September 9th, 2020 at 1:07:20, and the number of transactions that are included in that block with that timestamp. To verify these transactions were added to the ledger, the blockchain at that time. And then all of those different nodes, computing devices that keep the ledger, get a copy of this same set of transactions and update their ledger. This is another visualization from the white paper. You see a block of data. Each item is a transaction of data that's recorded into the block, and then they're connected. And so that's why the industry started calling it a blockchain. It's really a series of blocks of data that are connected together to link into an ongoing chain that continues to grow over time. It's as if, a bank's ledger continually gets bigger and bigger anytime people do more transactions on them. They also represent a series of events that have been happening over a particular time frame, because the blocks that come later in time. That's important as we'll talk about, for legal usage, because it can help record the chronology of events, such as the chronology of rights, of assets that are being transferred from owner to owner across time, like custody of title, or the chronology of document versions could be recorded on a blockchain to verify contract versions that are being written and developed over time. Once a block is stored in the chain, we call it immutable, not changeable, because it's economically very difficult to data transactions that have happened in earlier blocks. Bitcoin's blockchain is, as I mentioned, a timestamp server, a way to timestamp records of transactions. Because it is public, meaning anyone can have access to this digital ledger, it has auditability, the transactions are verifiable, and they're transparent. That does not mean you can't have privacy rights on the blockchain, because data that's recorded to the chain can be encrypted. But the fact that there was a transaction between certain addresses in the network, such as IP addresses on the internet, and the fact that it happened at a moment in time, that is auditable, verifiable. And that's important to understanding a lot of the future use cases for business and law. It's also important for creating an honest data system, an honest money system. People have this impression of Bitcoin as used for dark, nefarious criminal purposes, because some of its early uses were. And that's because early users made the mistake of thinking Bitcoin is completely anonymous. It's not. It's what we call a pseudonymous system that can still be traced. Just like, for example, people can trace your IP address and gain information about what's done at that IP address when you're using the internet. The Bitcoin white paper, in fact, uses the word honest 15 times, as you can see here from these snippets. That's also really important to our view of the future use of Bitcoin to create more honesty in business as well as in law. Bitcoin is the first real use of blockchain technology, and it is, in our view, the fusion of data plus money. It's right there in the name of the word. Bit, data, plus coin, money. It created a network where you could send data and use data that is fused with monetary value, because the internet did not have an easy way to do that. The internet is a means of sending data across computing networks, but that data doesn't have an easy way to be monetized. And Bitcoin solves that. So the other thing I want you to understand is Bitcoin is also a network protocol. Just like the internet has a network protocol, a foundational rule set for how data is transmitted from computing device to computing device on the network, Bitcoin also acts as a protocol for a data network. And once you open your mind to that, you'll realize that Bitcoin and the blockchain is a huge data network that can be used to transmit anywhere in the world instantly, quickly, cheaply, data that is fused with monetary value. And it's therefore the next step in the evolution of our digital world. So now, after Bitcoin emerged, there have been a number of other attempts to create other blockchain projects, or what we prefer to call distributed ledger technologies. In our view, most of the, quote, blockchains out there are not true blockchains. For us, a blockchain really needs to be public, meaning you don't need anyone's permission to operate on it, to send a transaction to the chain, or to read transactions from the chain. So Bitcoin is a public chain. There are other things, such as what we call federated ledgers, such as the R3 consortium, as well as private blockchains. And then IBM has a platform called Hyperledger Fabric, which it controls and manages. And a lot of companies are testing it out and trying to use it. We don't view that as a true blockchain because it's not public. It's controlled by a company that gets to gatekeep who uses it or not. The best way to compare that to the internet world is we have a public internet, which anyone can use and access at any time. And then many companies have created their own intranets or extranets that you need permission from a company or a group of companies to access. So a lot of companies, for example, have an internal intranet that only their employees can use, or an extranet that they set up for their customers, suppliers, or business partners that you need permissioned access to. So that's a good way of understanding the difference between them. Over the years, we've seen blockchain talked about a lot, but not used incredibly in business yet. And the reason for that is challenges in the scaling of the blockchain. And that explains our organization's view of Bitcoin and the version of Bitcoin we support, which is called Bitcoin SV. I'm going to explain a bit of that to you because it will affect our understanding of what are the business uses in the future. So Bitcoin's blockchain works by adding transactions approximately every 10 minutes to that ledger. But the people who took control of BTC, the ticker symbol a lot of people think is Bitcoin, kept the block small. So it only does about 3 to 7 transactions a second on that chain. That would be like starting email in the 1990s, but controlling the amount of email that could be sent per second to a very small amount. In our view, it would not have grown. And so that doesn't anywhere near compete with the Visa payment network, which does on average 2,000 transactions a second, and at its peak periods, somewhere to 40 or 50,000 transactions a second. So our approach is different. Let the blockchain scale really big, just like internet scaled, and we have much faster internet throughput today than we did in the old days of slow dial-up modems. And that allowed technology to really advance. If you have a small scale blockchain, meaning you keep the capacity very small, the fee that is required to send a transaction across the chain can get high. This is a chart which shows the daily average fees on the BTC network over the past few years. And you see some big spikes, including in 2018 of upwards of $35 to send a single transaction on the chain. Few people are going to send money, paying, for example, for your coffee at Starbucks, if it costs $35 just to make the transaction. And of course, you can't use this at the big levels for big business usage. And it's also very unreliable. Here are 3 snapshots in time of the BTC transaction fee cost from May and November of 2019, $4 to $1.40. Yesterday was about $3.43. All of those are far too high for the Bitcoin blockchain to work at scale and for it to have business usage. Ethereum, which is one of the main competing networks that businesses use, is also having similar issues with scaling and therefore causing its fees recently to go very high. Just recently, it was $14 to send a single transaction on the Ethereum blockchain. So our approach is very different with what's called Bitcoin SV. It's one of the 3 main competing chains of Bitcoin. The chain has split now to various different versions. And it stands for Satoshi Vision, designed to reflect the vision of Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. And we're going big with scaling. Let's let the blockchain grow to as big as capacity as necessary to support world business. So whereas the BTC chains at 7 transactions a second and these other chains that you see are not scaling as quickly, we today on our chain are at over 2,800 transactions per second, which is still nowhere near the need to compete with Visa. But by next year, we're comfortable that we believe we can hit about 50,000 transactions per second on our chain, given the technical progress we're making. And that's going to lead to a much more useful world for data and business transactions. Unlike the other chains, which have a transaction fee of $4 or $3, it costs less than 1/100th of a US cent right now to send a Bitcoin SV payment transaction to anyone, anywhere in the world, instantly. Less than 1/100th of a US cent. What does that mean from a practical perspective? It means you can use blockchain technology for all kinds of business uses, which are what your clients are thinking about. Everything you see here are things already being developed on our chain, from healthcare data usage down to augmented reality and virtual reality. I'll give you some examples of them soon, but it opens your mind to the idea if I could send data that is infused with money value, or allow people to monetize data and companies to monetize data with a network where you could send huge amounts of data for very, very, very tiny fees, you have a completely different world. And it's a world that is not just where everything can be online, like in today's internet, but where activity and business can be done on chain, having data and money value transferred across the blockchain. So now I want to move to the second part, which is talking about, well, how can you actually use this in business life? It's much easier to understand once you see some use cases. So let me start talking about one thing that is relevant to lawyers. I used to think about this a lot when I was an IP lawyer, which is I would have clients sometimes call me and say, hey, Jimmy, you know, we are a movie studio and we're interested in optioning or getting the rights to this book to turn into a motion picture, or we want the television rights. We want to make sure those rights have not been sold or licensed before. Can you help us do a title search? And in the old days, the Copyright Office records in the United States, you know, were not even electronic. Now they're increasingly become electronic, but still not a very complete system. And so it became very cumbersome to confirm the chain of title for intellectual property assets, especially things that are covered by copyright, because there's not an easily accessible complete registry. Well, what if we move to a different world where those records are not kept just in the Copyright Office, where you have to trust the Copyright Office to update them. And I'm sure they're doing a, you know, as good of a job as they can, but they can't keep up. And you have to trust one central authority to maintain the record. What if IP owners started recording their IP rights, including the transfer or license of them, on a public ledger, the blockchain? So here's an example. You've got on the left here, copyright symbol reflecting I could record, if I'm a copyright owner, that I have the copyright to some work. And you can identify it on the blockchain by number, the US copyright registration number, for example, if you've registered it for copyright protection. You record it on the blockchain. It can reflect the moment you've recorded it in time, because that's important. And then in the future, maybe you enter into a business deal where someone pays you money and transfers money to you for you to sell that copyrighted asset or license certain rights to it. And that act, that business deal, can be recorded on the blockchain as well, such as a transfer of copyright or assignment of copyright is recorded in the US Copyright Office. And then in the future, if I'm trying to do a copyright title search, yes, I could go look in the Copyright Office, but I could also easily track the chain of title of that asset on the blockchain if some company creates software solutions, which I'm sure people will do, to make it very easy to filter and trace the chain of title on that particular asset. And because the ledger is publicly accessible and maintained not just by one person, organization, or company, but by copies all over the world on different computing servers, you're not dependent on the Copyright Office itself to be constantly updating the ledger. Supply chain management is another example of an industry where the blockchain can provide some powerful use cases, because the whole need for supply chain management is to be able to track the progress of goods or items across its journey in the supply chain, including through customs. Well, that it takes data to be recorded by different companies right now across the supply chain. But often there are data silos in industries like this, where the data kept by one company is in a different system or database than data kept by other companies or in different geographic regions. So it's harder to access the real-time status of a product or a part being transported across the supply chain. But what if you could record all of that data to a public ledger so that everyone involved in the supply chain process, from the manufacturer to the distributor to the wholesaler to importers, they're recording their data to the same place, a publicly accessible ledger that everyone can access and follow the journey across time, time-stamped on a digital ledger, the timestamp server, so that everyone can be seeing the journey of that product. It would make things a lot easier and break down data silos in the industry and bring greater efficiencies. One of the startup ventures in our Bitcoin SV ecosystem is called Unisat. It's a venture out of Norway. And Unisat stands for Universal Source of Truth, because it views the blockchain as a place to have a universal source of truth of transactions that everyone can access. So it's launched a supply chain management and ERP platform using our Bitcoin SV blockchain. And its first specialized platform is called Seafood Chain, where it's targeting the seafood industry because they love their fish in Norway. And they're already doing an in-market test to be able to use this technology to track the journey of halibut from first a farmer, a halibut farmer called Sterling, to a seafood distributor called Reinhardtsen, and then finally to the table, to a sushi restaurant chain. And in the future, they're going to create a consumer mobile app so that you, as the customer at a restaurant or a grocery store, could scan a QR code or other identifier and be able to look at the chain of history of that particular product or ingredients in it across the supply chain. It's a way to also help verify environmental sustainability goals, as well as the source of origin of products, which will be particularly relevant to trademark lawyers on the call, because often you have geographic descriptors or source of origin marks that need to be verified or contested in trademark litigation. In the healthcare data context, there's a very exciting venture and project that is also building on our Bitcoin SV blockchain in the healthcare data space. It's called EHR Data. It's a new company launched by people who founded a prior company, which was a leader in pharmacy software and technology management for about 40 years. It's using the blockchain to try and combat the opioid addiction crisis in the United States. A lot of people get addicted to pain-killing drugs for various reasons. You know, they have surgery, they have an accident, they get prescribed opioids, but they take too much, or their doctor prescribes doses which are not appropriate for them. Or they are able to fill the prescriptions at more than one pharmacy when they should not be able to do that. Part of the problem lies in the fact that our healthcare industry, particularly in the United States, has too many data silos. For example, your medical records from your primary care physician are kept differently from a specialist at another facility and are kept differently from your pharmacy. There's no easy way to, in real time, give a medical provider access to your complete medical history. And so that contributes to the problems. So for example, a doctor, when they're prescribing an opioid, may not know the correct dose for you or the optimal dose based upon history you had with another physician or in another territory. And so one solution for this is to take healthcare records and create a global electronic healthcare record for you that can be maintained on this public blockchain, but is encrypted to ensure your privacy and allow you as the patient to act as an empowered consumer of your own data, so that you, with different technology tools, can authorize who has access to those medical records. And when you do authorize that, everyone from the physician to your pharmacy can in real time have better access to a more complete history of your medical experience. And that should lead over time to improved care-making decisions and help cut down on some of these opioid addiction problems. It alone is not going to stop it, but by improving data access and the comprehensiveness of real-time clinical data, it's a huge leap in the right direction. It also allows you as a consumer to monetize your own data. We as consumers and patients don't have an easy way to monetize our personal data. Facebook, for example, and Google make money off our data, but there's not a way to pay you small amounts of money for giving someone access to your data until Bitcoin and blockchain. Because if the data is stored on the blockchain, it has monetary value, and you can be paid small amounts of Bitcoin to a wallet, a digital wallet that you set up for Bitcoin, when you give people access to the encrypted data on the blockchain. It's a perfect example of that vision of Bitcoin being the fusion of data plus money. And so they're in development of the proof of concept for this project. They'll be speaking at one of our big events in a few weeks and announcing more updates on it. But this is a really exciting use case for blockchain technology. So as you think about your own particular industries and the companies and clients you work for, I encourage you to ask this question. What data silos in the industries I work for can be broken down? Where would our industry have more value if data was accessible to anyone at any time across the industry value chain? There are so many industries that would benefit from this, as well as consumers. A particular application that'll be relevant to lawyers is Docs. It's another startup venture in our Bitcoin SV ecosystem, but it's reflective of a trend out there. Using the blockchain to record timestamps of data and documents. Lawyers will really appreciate this. Sometimes you want to be able to prove that there was a certain document at a certain time or a certain version, for example. And Docs is one of a number of companies out there that is creating an application to allow anyone, a person, a company, a lawyer, to upload documents or a digital hash of the document to the blockchain to timestamp the time and date of its existence, so that you can then go back in time later and verify whether a particular document you're looking at really did exist at some point in time that someone is claiming. So it's a good illustration of the use of the blockchain as this ledger that is time-stamping data across time. For the entertainment and music lawyers on the call, here's another really good use case. It's trying to take the very complicated, convoluted world of music and digital rights management payments and make it easier. Music's really complicated because when you have a hit recording, let's say Beyonce's recorded a great track, there are numerous rights holders who contributed to the writing of the song, particularly the song composition. And right now, we use these intermediaries, performing rights organizations, or the rights managers, to be keeping track of how many times a song is played on the radio or streamed on Spotify or downloaded and played on personal download devices or on television or movie programs. And that's really complicated. And then they have to do reporting to try and break apart how much revenue by percentage each of the rights holders get. So look at this example. You've got a song, you've got 4 rights holders who each get a different percentage, and some performing rights organization or rights manager has to track all this and send quarterly or monthly or annual royalty checks to each of the rights holders. It's really time consuming and of course creates cost inefficiencies. What if we use a blockchain-based method for distributing music and other forms of content? You provide a digital music file and encoded in the music file, which can be placed on the blockchain, so the music can actually be downloaded.
Jimmy,
Yes?
Jimmy, we appear to have lost sound. Oh no, you've come back.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's all right.
So you can place a music file on the blockchain and encode it with the information about who the rights holders are, what percentage they are owed for use of the music. And then people can actually pay to a Bitcoin address every time they stream the song and every time they download the song. So payment's automatic without all these intermediaries. And then instead of waiting for the performing rights organization to send you a check, if you pay 50 cents to download the song, the percentages that each rights holder is owed can be instantly and automatically deposited to a Bitcoin wallet that they designate. So they're getting payments every second of the day. And because you can do micropayments with the blockchain at scale like Bitcoin SV, meaning since it only costs 1/100th of a cent to send a payment, you don't have to wait till the end of the month to get your payment. I could get paid if I'm a songwriter 1 penny at a time. It's very easy if the blockchain is allowed to scale with these micropayment capabilities. So that's so much faster and it would change how business operates. There's a company in our Bitcoin SV world out in Korea. It runs one of the 2 or 3 largest mobile app stores in South Korea. It's called One Store, and they're building an application just for this very use, where it's called Buscon. It allows people to post music videos and songs that they write. It allows fans to basically pay them through a token that is reflected with Bitcoin SV. And then the payments get split up as appropriate to each of the rights holders involved with a particular artist. This is what opens the door to the world of smart contracts that you've heard about. So what's a smart contract? It's basically taking a human agreed contract and automating it on the blockchain so that when certain acts happen or events, money is distributed, a form of data or record is changed on the blockchain. So an example of that is the music example I just gave you. You're smart coding into the blockchain file in a music track, essentially a contract that says these 4 people get a percentage of certain percent of the revenue, and it automatically gets paid every time a download happens, every time a stream happens. And so it automates business and contractual activity. So smart contracts are not right for everything. the most complicated business agreements are probably not going to be done on smart contracts. They're very good for contracts which have a very discrete set of events. If Y happens, then Z gets paid, right? If the music file gets downloaded, these 4 people get paid this exact percentage. Something that can be very easily defined and based upon specific events. So think about the sale of a house. Right now we depend on all these intermediaries like title, research companies, and escrow companies. What if you were to sell a piece of property, enter into an agreement between buyer and seller and say, once I pay you through the blockchain or some other means, once that event happens, things are coded so that the title on the title registry automatically is changed so that title transfers to the buyer from the seller. And that's recorded on the blockchain at a moment in time. And so that's an example of how you can code a contract to automatically lead to certain events. So people are already talking about doing this with not just homes and property. Think about auto finance payments. If you don't make an auto finance payment, then title is not changed at a certain moment of time. You could imagine doing this with wills, which sounds a little scary, but once a death certificate is recorded on the blockchain and certain other events happen, such as from probate court, assets that have been dedicated to someone in a will could be automatically dispersed without further controversy. Same thing with insurance claims. So let's take a look at an example in the travel industry. A lot of people don't pay for travel insurance. I don't, because mostly it's a pain in the butt to actually submit a claim. But what if you created a smart travel insurance policy where you say Alice wants to pay $20 to get insurance for her airplane flight that she's going to take, particularly in these COVID times where you don't know if it's going to get canceled. And the contract basically says, if your flight is more than 4 hours late, then Alice will get paid some type of claim amount in order to compensate her for the time or the extra expense she has to incur. The flight time can be actually publicly brought into the chain or a smart contract from what are called oracles. The FAA, for example, tracks flight data. So you could verify a key event. Did the flight arrive more than 4 hours late? If that is true, then automatically she gets paid $200 of an insurance claim into her Bitcoin wallet. That is automated. So that's a good example of some type of discrete event that could be recorded and reflected in a smart contract on a blockchain. Same thing with construction insurance. A lot of builders get construction insurance to account for bad weather, for example. They're required, for example, to finish a construction project in 6 months, or they get a bonus payment if it's finished in 6 months. But what if they want to offset against the risk of bad weather? They buy a risk insurance policy. If the construction is delayed by weather, which can be confirmed through publicly available weather information, you can confirm, for example, did more than 20 inches of rain fall in the past 2 months through public weather data. If that happens, then an insurance claim amount is paid to them automatically through a Bitcoin wallet using a blockchain-based smart contract. So claims payments are an example of something you could distribute through the blockchain, through multiple holders, just like in the music example, another way to automate things. We're a long way off till you see this happening frequently. It takes creating, for example, smart contract languages, which developers can use to take smart contracts that we lawyers write and convert them into code that can be implemented on the blockchain. So Scrypt is one such example of a smart contract language in our blockchain ecosystem, setting up to allow that. Finally, let me finish by going through a quick overview of some legal issues and how this will affect the legal industry. As you're thinking about this, you're probably going, wow, how is this going to affect my clients? So I don't have time to cover every possible thing because there are so many, but I want to give you a few examples. One, registries. Any type of information and ownership of assets can be an easy use case for blockchain technology, as we've talked about. So the state of Delaware has already passed a statute which makes it clear that public companies can keep their shareholder records on what is defined to be a blockchain. But it does require the records to be converted to a clearly legible paper form within a reasonable time. So it's kind of odd. It requires basically having both a blockchain record as well as a paper record. But think about where this is headed. If corporations can maintain shareholder registries on the blockchain, you can enable transfer of shares through sales and transfers to be recorded on the blockchain, and shareholder voting could be confirmed and monitored through blockchain applications. And so start thinking about all the other types of corporate as well as public records that can be maintained on a blockchain. For government agencies, you don't have the same level of privacy considerations because public records are meant to be public. And those are a very easy use case for recording the data to a blockchain. In addition, in the smart contract world, we're already seeing jurisdictions pass what I would call more proactive laws saying, hey, smart contracts are valid here. They're not necessary, but some states as well as countries are trying to signal that they are friendly to blockchain businesses. So Arizona in 2017 passed legislation to recognize that smart contracts are valid, meaning contracts that are reflected electronically and implemented on some type of digital network or ledger are valid there. Other jurisdictions are following suit. In addition, they confirmed that electronic signatures as well as contracts secured through blockchain technology are valid under the state law. And one of the interesting legal questions that comes up is the issue of electronic signatures. When you send a Bitcoin transaction or a blockchain transaction, you must sign it with what's called your private key. It's basically the cryptographic proof that you are the holder and controller of the data or the Bitcoin. And it also can be used to essentially identify you. In the non-blockchain world, it's already very well established that electronic signatures are valid under EU law. The US has the e-Sign Act, which basically says any electronic symbol attached to a contract can be reflected as intent to enter into that contract. So one of the legal issues I foresee being played out in the future is the question of whether a blockchain digital signature that you use to sign and send a transaction on the blockchain, whether it be money or data, whether that can also be used to satisfy the electronic contract digital signature requirements of law in the United States, as well as in other jurisdictions. My belief is it can, because a blockchain digital signature can uniquely identify a person. You might get disputes over who controls that digital signature for a Bitcoin transaction, because it's just a cryptographic way of controlling a particular, for example, address or set of assets on the Bitcoin network. In addition, for the litigators out there, you're going to be seeing a lot of evidentiary investigation as well as battles on the blockchain, because as you can see, business records being moved more to blockchain, commercial activity, payments happening on the blockchain, it'll become the source of evidence for disputes. So Vermont, way back in 2016, which seems like an eternity now, updated its evidence statutes to state that a blockchain-based digital record is considered a business record and thus admissible over hearsay objections when you're having a court battle. Importantly, though, the blockchain record has to be authenticated by the written declaration of a qualified person to confirm that the entry of the record on the blockchain conforms to business processes. So it's basically just treating blockchain records as you would treat, from an evidentiary perspective, records that any business keeps in paper form or in electronic form, for example, on Excel files or databases. In the internet world, China's Supreme Court ruled in 2018 that internet dispute courts, because they have a specialized court for that in China, will recognize blockchain data for evidence with certain conditions. For example, there has to be digital signatures, reliable timestamps. We go back to that importance of time again, as well as other verification. The timestamp is really both critical and useful in the litigation context because it helps to authenticate the chronology of time, or at least the authenticity of the record on the blockchain as to a moment in time. And finally, there's increasing privacy issues. If we record more data, including your personal consumer data, to a blockchain, how will companies comply with data privacy laws, including the GDPR in the European Union? And the answer to that is being explored by a lot of companies. I'm sure they're going to find some advanced solutions, but ones already being proposed are encryption of data. Just because you have data on a blockchain does not mean you cannot encrypt it and therefore protect the privacy. You can obfuscate the data. You can try to manage what jurisdictions, applications can read the data from in order to protect against jurisdictional issues. So just because the data is on a blockchain doesn't mean you can allow applications that can restrict still the geographies from which you can pull the data. Digital identity management is also coming to the blockchain and Bitcoin. When you are using Bitcoin, as I mentioned, you use it with a combination of private and public key pairs. And people have created wallets now, just like you have a digital, bank app, there's digital wallets that hold Bitcoin. And when you log into that and use the private keys associated with your Bitcoin, it's also identifying you in a certain way. And I predict a future where the wallets we use for Bitcoin also are used to manage your identity. So instead of Facebook login or Google login to apps across the internet, you may be logging in with your Bitcoin private keys that are associated with your coins or your wallet, as well as data you personally store on the blockchain so that you can monetize it yourself and have money in the form of Bitcoin deposited immediately to your Bitcoin wallet that's also associated with your identity. That raises some powerful use cases, but of course, for the privacy and security lawyers out there, some interesting privacy issues to consider. And finally, changes in the legal profession. Here are things I ask you to all think about. You're going to be in the future facing the need to convert human language contracts into blockchain coded smart contracts. It's difficult to do now. It doesn't mean you have to learn to code, but you're probably going to need to navigate learning applications that will be built to help you do that, as well as to resolve disputes in the event a smart contract does not properly code the intent of a human language contract. You're also going to need to understand how data and records are recorded on the blockchain, and the litigators will need to learn the processes to both find and authenticate blockchain evidence to get them introduced into court, including over hearsay objections. Your clients will be developing business processes for these worlds, such as what records do they store on the blockchain? Do we allow shareholder rights and votes to be managed on a blockchain? Do we keep our IP assets on a blockchain? And what business processes are associated with that? So I expect you'll be helping your clients with those questions in the future. And finally, dispute resolution. I think there's probably a need for specialized arbitration and dispute resolution forums for a world of smart contracts where the dispute resolvers have more experience in this and can be evaluating things such as, does the smart contract code the human language contract correctly, so that people understand the meaning of a Bitcoin or blockchain private key and how it identifies someone or not. The judicial courts will confront this in years to come, and they already are in some ways. But I think for businesses out there, you might want to consider the creation or support of specialized arbitration and dispute resolution forums or processes that help resolve disputes in a smart contract world. So I know there was a lot to cover in this webinar, and I want to leave you, before I take some questions with whatever time we have, with, again, the reminder that don't be scared. You don't want to be Blockbuster, but you and your clients want to be the Netflixes of the world, adopting and transforming existing business models to meet the moment of digital technology, which in this case is not just the internet, but the advent of the fusion of data plus money in the form of blockchain, a time-stamped server, a chronological history of data that is best used, in our view, with Bitcoin and Bitcoin SV, but you'll see many other attempts on other distributed ledgers out there. So with that, if there's any time, I will take any questions there are. I will finally make one quick plug, which is we've got a big conference coming up on September 30th, October 1st and 2nd. It was supposed to be live in New York. Now it's going to be live virtually across New York and London. If you want to learn more about our vision of one world with one chain, just like we have one internet, we think there should just be one blockchain. This is a big business conference, including with lawyers and business professionals speaking. Sign up for free at CoinGeekConference.com.
Jimmy, that was excellent. I think you rendered comprehensible what is, or certainly what has been to me, a somewhat complex topic. I think you gave us some excellent use cases as well. Judging by the popularity of this as a subject and you as a speaker, we do have plenty of questions. So I'm suggesting we probably will go beyond 2 o'clock. Obviously, if you need to go before then, please do. But Jimmy, I hope you'd stay to just answer a few of these questions, if it's all right for you.
As long as you need.
So one of the first questions that we got, and we got quite a few, looks like Dan Nicholson says, for the attorneys out there that are interested in decentralized technology like myself, where are the best places to network and break into the industry?
Where are the best places to network and break into the industry? Well, for our ecosystem, you can sign up to be an affiliate of Bitcoin Association at bitcoinassociation.net. And so we send out information about this all the time. We have events. A lot of these ecosystems have meetups, but they're more for like enthusiasts. Ours are more business oriented because we're a business organization. So I recommend you sign up at bitcoinassociation.net. Affiliates are meant for individuals, professionals, students, developers who are interested in learning more. There are also other organizations in the United States. There's one called the Digital Chamber of Commerce, I believe is the name, which is Washington, D.C. based, that has a lot of the companies operating the space. It does public policy and lobbying work. And I know there are more local groups in different jurisdictions. I know more bar associations are trying to start blockchain activities. So for the lawyers who are wanting to do things with lawyers, I encourage you to check out your local bar association.
Okay. Some of the other questions, this one's from Eric Martinez, and he says, what are your thoughts on online contract companies withholding the development or transition of blockchain technology to take over the industry? For example, how do you think DocuSign affects smart contracts that use blockchain?
Well, I think companies like DocuSign have they're the perfect example of a company that should evolve into the blockchain world. Same thing with Adobe. A lot of people, use Adobe Sign as well, because when you sign a DocuSign contract, right, you're relying on DocuSign's database, right, to keep a copy of it and your own personal copy of the form that was signed and who signed it at what points in time. But that could easily be transferred to the blockchain, right? So that even if you don't store the actual final document on the blockchain, the record of who signed, identified by private keys, right, at what moment in time is confirmable and verifiable on a blockchain. So I think they are the ideal type of company to be leveraging and moving into a blockchain version of their application.
Okay, there's a question from Paula. Before I ask that, just a favor, everybody, in the chat box here, I've posted a link to our survey so that we can keep bringing you really enthralling speakers like Jimmy here. Please, can you just give us some feedback on our survey? So Paula Leichter, hope I pronounced that correctly. What type of costs are typically associated with converting monies put into a digital wallet into actual money or moving digital currency, and what type of tax implications are there for that digital money in the digital wallet?
Sure. So this is sort of a broader question about how digital currency works. I'll talk about it from the US perspective. Obviously, it's a little bit different around the world. But basically, how most people get any type of digital currency today is unless someone sends it to you, and I sometimes send bits of Bitcoin to friends just to get them, experience with it. Most people buy their digital currency today off of online exchanges. So there's some major exchanges. The United States, big ones, one of the biggest ones called Coinbase, for example. You create an account, you have to go through a whole verification process because the exchanges are getting pressured by governments to do KYC, know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering compliance to make sure, just like when you open a bank account, you have to give all this information about you so they can trace you. You then fund your account somehow, either through a bank transfer or some of them accept credit card payments, and you can buy Bitcoin, Bitcoin SV, Ethereum. The exchange takes a fee, and that varies. It can be several percentage points. So maybe like 2 to 3 percentage points, depending on the exchange. And then every time you do a transaction to trade it, let's say you wanted to then take, people often buy Bitcoin, hoping to get rich and get a Lambo, right? And if the price goes up, when you want to then trade it to what we call fiat currency, government issued currency, such as US dollar, some exchanges allow trading to fiat currency, some only allow trading between digital currencies. So every time you then trade it, you do a swap, just like you would do a swap of stock, trading on a stock exchange, or doing trading of foreign currencies. And then the exchange will take a fee, usually again in that 2 to 3% range. There are some platforms that take higher, 4 to 5%, but it varies. It also varies sometimes on whether you become like a premier customer and do higher volume trading. But that's generally how it works. If you want to trade between digital currency and US dollars. At higher amounts, people will usually use an OTC broker, an over-the-counter broker, because you can get better rates and for higher volume.
Okay, there's another question. This one's from Joel Schwartz, who's a member of our faculty on cybersecurity and privacy law. And Joel asks, you talked about smart contracts, and you talked about some of the events that trigger a bunch of automatic payments, e.g. you mentioned Alice and her airline travel. Joel wonders, not sure why you need blockchain for this. Seems like a simple set of automated transactions. Why would you need blockchain?
Sure, you could do it without blockchain technology, but then Alice, the customer, has to, there's a couple of barriers. Alice, first of all, has to trust that your system is working correctly. Secondly, the cost to the company is more with the payment systems that are used today. For example, if you're going to send Alice money, you have to send Alice money through some type of bank transfer, use some type of payment processing service, right? Whereas with Bitcoin, as I mentioned, you could send it for 1/100th of a cent. So if you're going to do it without blockchain, then you're going to have to involve some payment intermediary as well. The other advantage of blockchain is the public auditability, verifiability. Some consumers, like their particularly younger generation, want to be able to verify that something happened and that they don't have to trust you as the company. It's a trust issue. If something happens, it automatically should be paid to my Bitcoin wallet, and I don't want to trust you. And if there's a problem, I don't want to have to call your customer support line. Right. But one of the big advantages, honestly, is the lack of need of the payment intermediary.
Okay. Another question from Joel. Joel, you are Mr. Question today. You really are. So have there been any noteworthy legal challenges to the validity or admissibility of blockchain evidence where a court decision has been issued?
I'm not sure because luckily or unluckily, I'm mostly out of the legal world these days. I sort of stay on top of it generally, but I have not been following all of the court cases. I believe the ones I looked at about a year or so ago when I first put this presentation together, it was deemed admitted, but that was based upon still needing to have essentially the custodian of records for a business be able to have a declaration that attested to the elements needed to overcome the hearsay rule. So far, I haven't seen any court, that I know of say, blockchain records are not, I'm not going to accept them, or if I think I've read about sometimes where judges evaluated issues about whether or not you still have to authenticate the blockchain record. They're not self-authenticating, right? Some business still needs to have a witness say, I put this on the blockchain, and here's how, even if it's through an automated way. So that step still needs to be satisfied.
Okay. This is a whole series of questions from Tom. So Tom says, why would anyone use BSV versus BCH, Tether, Venmo, etc.?
Sure. Well, each of those are different comparisons. So BCH is one of the other two main competing chains of Bitcoin. The biggest difference is we've scaled much bigger. So they're at, I think it was on the chart I showed, maybe a much smaller set of transactions. Our capacity is far larger. They're focused on just the cash usage of Bitcoin. We want the big data enterprise usage. Their community, just to be, without getting to the politics of it, are much more crypto libertarian, crypto anarchists who believe in a lot of features in Bitcoin to, facilitate privacy, keeping it out of the reach of government. We believe in a lawful, regulation-friendly ecosystem because we know that's necessary for big businesses to get comfortable using this technology. So that's a big reason to not use BCH versus BSV. For the other ones, Tether is just what's called a supposed stable coin, meaning when you buy a Tether, it's supposed to be backed by some real dollar or asset somewhere. It doesn't have all of the other data functionality. It's only for the use of sending money. Our blockchain supports all this big data use. So you could record a music file to the blockchain. You can't do that on Tether. You can't do that on a lot of these other blockchain projects. You can infuse healthcare data with money value in a way that you can't on these other blockchains. And because our transaction fee is so small, you can send huge amounts of these data transactions. So it's just the scale of it opens up much more business usage. And Venmo is only a way to send money between people. And you still have to use the intermediary of your bank account or other way to fund it. So there's a fee associated with it. So it doesn't have all the data usage. So again, the biggest difference, Bitcoin is not just about sending money, it's the data power, which is really what is powerful.
Okay, there were some other questions, Tom, but I think maybe Jimmy perhaps did answer those in that. We've gone over time, but as I said, I think it was an indication of the popularity of the topic and you as a speaker, Jimmy, that there were plenty of questions. Jimmy, are you happy for us to share your slides with the attendees today? Thank you.
We'll send you the file of it.
Thank you. And I would ask people again, just as a thank you really to Jimmy and to show your appreciation, would you just fill out our survey? I've popped the link up again there. We will stay online for folks to be able to fill that out. But Jimmy, you've been a fantastic speaker. We appreciate you freely giving up your time today. We've enjoyed what you've said. Like I say, for me, you rendered somewhat more comprehensible a topic that was a bit more complex. So thank you.
Hopefully you all get your head around it and can help your clients well. And it's the next major technology leap. Get ready for it.
Thank you. And to folks attending, thank you for coming. We'll send you out an email with a recording and a link to this survey again. So please, if I could ask you, give us some feedback and we can keep bringing really excellent speakers like Jimmy. Folks, thanks for coming today. Bye-bye.